The moment you reveal that you need something, you have already surrendered the negotiation. Not partially, entirely. The other party saw the hunger in your eyes before you finished your sentence, and from that instant forward, every term, every condition, every exchange was calculated against the weight of your desperation. You came to the table wanting. They saw it, and they used it. This is not cynicism. This is not philosophy offered to comfort the bitter. This is the observation of a man who spent years inside the courts of power, who watched princes negotiate treaties, while their cities burned, who watched men beg for mercy with such naked urgency that their executioners were almost embarrassed to grant it. Desperation does not move powerful men toward generosity. It moves them toward exploitation. It is the most legible signal a human being can transmit, and once transmitted, it cannot be recalled. I have watched kingdoms fall, not because their armies were outmatched, but because their ambassadors walked into halls with the scent of need upon them. I have seen alliances dissolve not over betrayal, but over the moment one party allowed the other to perceive how much they stood to lose. The moment you look as though you cannot afford to lose, you will lose. This is not a pattern I invented. It is a law etched into the behaviour of men, long before my quill moved across parchment. I simply had the discipline to observe it, without flinching. Never look desperate. Not when you are losing, not when you are afraid, not when the walls are closing, not when the treasury is empty and your enemies are sharpening their blades in the corridor outside. The composure you wear in your worst hour is worth more than any resource you might still possess. It is the last fortress, and most men surrender it voluntarily, without siege, without battle, and because they do not understand its value until the moment it falls. I was a servant of the Florentine Republic for 14 years. I travelled to the courts of Cesare Borgia, to France, to the Holy Roman Emperor. I watched how men of supreme power conducted themselves in moments of visible pressure. I negotiated on behalf of a state that frequently had less gold, less military capacity, and less political leverage than the parties we sat across from. And what I observed consistently was this. The man who appeared indifferent to outcome commanded the room, regardless of his actual position. Cesare Borgia wasn't always the most powerful man in a room, but he was always the most composed. I watched him receive catastrophic news without the alteration of a single feature. I watched him listen to reports that would have driven lesser men to shouting, to gesturing, to the visible agitation that betrays calculation. He simply absorbed it. He thanked the messenger without emphasis. He poured wine as though the report had been about the weather. And in doing so, he denied his enemies the intelligence they came hoping to gather. They could not read him. They could not position themselves against a man whose reaction gave them nothing to measure. And so, they overestimated him constantly, which was precisely the outcome he required. After the Medici returned to Florence and the Republic I served collapsed around me, I was arrested. I was tortured. I was placed in a cell and subjected to the strappado 4 times, suspended by my arms bound behind my back, dropped sharply, the joints stretched to the edge of destruction. I confessed to nothing, not because I was unusually brave, but because I understood, even in that extremity, that the appearance of a man who has something to reveal is more useful to interrogators than a man who is already broken. My composure was not comfort. It was calculation, and it preserved me. They released me eventually. I was exiled to my farm at Sant'Andrea in Percasina. I had nothing. The career I had built, the connections I had cultivated, the reputation I had earned through years of service, dissolved. My financial position was precarious. My name was suspect. My future was opaque. And I knew that if I allowed the world to see the full weight of my destitution, the few doors that remained open to me would seal permanently. A discarded man who looks discarded receives no second consideration. A discarded man who looks temporarily inconvenienced, who carries himself as though the exile is a pause rather than a conclusion, retains the possibility of return. I wrote letters during those years. I corresponded with men of influence. I made observations. I completed the print. And in every interaction I presented a composure that my circumstances did not warrant. Not because I was dishonest about my condition, but because I understood that the quality of the attention men give you is determined almost entirely by the quality of the image you project. Present yourself as finished, and you will be treated as finished. Present yourself as a man between chapters, and you will be treated as a man worth watching. This is the core law I offer you. Desperation lowers perceived value faster than any failure can. Composure raises it faster than any success. The world does not respond to what is true, and it responds to what it sees. Read that again. Absorb its consequences. Most men spend their lives attempting to change their circumstances so that they can finally feel composed. They are waiting for the day when their position is strong enough, their resources sufficient, their security established enough that they can afford to stop appearing anxious. That day, for most, never comes, and even if it did, they would discover that composure practiced only from a position of strength is not composure at all. It is merely the absence of pressure. True composure, the kind that moves power in your direction, is the composure you maintain when you have every reason to fall apart. Examine how a man behaves after rejection. This reveals everything about his relationship with desperation. The man who receives a refusal and immediately begins to negotiate against himself, who softens his position, who offers more, who asks why and then adjusts his pitch to accommodate the objections. This man has communicated something irreversible. He has told the other party that the refusal worked, that it produced exactly the response it was designed to produce, that his need for the outcome is greater than his willingness to accept its absence. From this point forward, he is no longer negotiating. He is bidding against himself, and the other party simply waits to see how low he will go. And I witnessed this pattern in the courts of Italy with such regularity that it became tedious to watch. An emissary would arrive to seek an alliance. The host state would decline in measured terms. The emissary, frantic, conscious of returning home empty-handed, aware of what failure would mean for his standing, would begin immediately to revise his offer. He would sweeten terms that had not yet been declared insufficient. He would apologize for positions he had not been asked to abandon. He would make concessions into empty air, gifts to no one, surrenders without battle. And the host would watch with the calm satisfaction of a man who has just confirmed his favourable position, and would wait to see what else the emissary would offer before the night was finished. Compare this to the few emissaries I witnessed who understood their craft. They received the measured refusal with equal measure. They allowed silence. They did not rush to fill it. They appeared to be not anxious, but thoughtful, as though the refusal had introduced a new variable that required consideration rather than panic. They might say, "I see, I will need to consult with the council before I can proceed further." No revision of terms, no negotiation against themselves, no visible distress. And in that response they communicated something the frantic emissary never could, that their alternatives were sufficient, that returning home without the agreement was not ruin, that the host state's participation was valued, but not required. This communication, conducted entirely through composure rather than words, changed the entire geometry of the negotiation. Because a party that appears to need you less than you need them holds all strategic advantage, not because their position is necessarily superior, but because their willingness to walk away from the table resets every calculation you have made about what you can demand from them. The world chases what does not chase it. This is not merely an observation about romance, though it holds there with particular ferocity. It is a structural feature of how human beings assign value. Men desire what is scarce. What presents itself as available, as eager, as anxious for acceptance, is measured immediately at a discount. What presents itself as indifferent, as already occupied, as capable of continuing without the interaction, is measured at a premium. And you can possess identical resources in both cases. The only variable is the display of need, and it determines the price others will pay for your presence. Now examine how this operates in the sphere you inhabit. Your workplace is a court. I have said this before, and I will continue to say it because the parallel is exact, and most men refuse to see it. Every office contains a hierarchy. Every hierarchy is sustained by a mixture of genuine competence and performed competence. The man who advances is not always the most capable. He is frequently the man whose demeanour commands the most respect, which is to say, the man who appears least desperate for the advancement he seeks. Consider the man passed over for a position he coveted. If he allows this disappointment to alter his behaviour, if he becomes visibly withdrawn, if he works with diminished investment, and if he begins circulating his dissatisfaction among colleagues, he has done something catastrophically counterproductive. He has told the hierarchy precisely how much the decision mattered to him. He has confirmed that their judgment over his fate possesses the power to diminish him, and an organization, like a court, will not elevate a man whom it knows it can diminish. It will continue to withhold from him, because the withholding works. And the correct response to being passed over, which very few men can execute because it requires the suppression of an entirely natural instinct, is apparent indifference. Not sullenness, not false cheer, a composed, unaltered continuation of performance, as though the decision has registered and been categorized as irrelevant data, as though the man's trajectory was never dependent on this particular outcome. This response communicates something the hierarchy finds disquieting, that you possess the internal resources to continue without their validation, that you cannot be managed through the withdrawal of their favor, that your value to yourself does not fluctuate with their assessment of your value to them. This makes them uncertain. Uncertainty is uncomfortable for those who maintain power through the dispensation of reward and punishment. So a subordinate who responds to punishment with equanimity is a subordinate they cannot entirely control. And men in positions of authority, even those of moderate intelligence, understand that such a person must either be elevated or eliminated before he organizes others who are similarly composed. In matters of alliance, which is what relationships are, viewed without sentiment, the same mechanism operates with even greater intensity, because in intimate connection, the desire to appear needed is particularly acute. Men confuse vulnerability with authenticity. They believe that displaying their hunger for affection is evidence of sincerity. It is evidence of sincerity, but it is also evidence of the one quality that erodes attraction more reliably than any fault of character: need. The man who makes clear, too early, that his emotional stability depends upon the continuation of an alliance has handed the other party an instrument of absolute control, and every subsequent exchange is now conducted with this knowledge in the background. The other party can raise or lower the quality of attention they provide, and they know that the response will be correspondingly dramatic. They are, in effect, holding a lever, and even those who have no malicious intent will pull it occasionally, from boredom, from testing, from the simple human satisfaction of knowing the lever exists. The man who does not appear desperate for the continuation of the alliance holds no such lever in the other party's hands. His response to diminished attention is not dramatic. His behavior does not alter in proportion to the warmth or coldness he receives. He is, or appears to be, occupied, directed, proceeding with his life regardless of the alliance's current temperature. This absence of visible need creates in the other party an entirely different relationship to the connection. And they cannot take it for granted because they cannot be certain it will persist. They cannot manage him through withdrawal because he does not appear to notice withdrawal. They can only, if they wish to maintain the alliance, invest in it, which means they must pursue, which means the balance of desire has shifted. Let me now address the silence. Silence, in conditions of loss, is the most underutilized instrument of power available to a man. When you have suffered a reversal, when the negotiation has gone against you, when the relationship has cooled, when the position has been denied, the instinct is to speak, to explain, to justify, to offer additional information that might alter the outcome, to demonstrate through words that the reversal was unwarranted, or that circumstances might shift. Do not speak. Every word you produce in this condition costs you something. If the words reveal that you are distressed, they confirm the other party's leverage. If the words reveal that you are attempting to reverse the outcome, they confirm that the outcome matters more to you than your composure. If the words reveal that you are confused about why the reversal occurred, they confirm a lack of political intelligence that further reduces your perceived value. The silence costs you nothing. The silence is the position of a man who has absorbed the information, who is processing it with unhurried deliberation, and who will respond when he is ready, rather than when pressure demands it. Silence after rejection is one of the most powerful communications available. It says, "You have not destroyed my equilibrium." It says, "I have no urgency to resolve this." It says, "I was prepared for multiple outcomes and yours is one of them," and it leaves the other party without information. which means they cannot continue to calibrate their position against your reaction, which means they must wait. And waiting, for men who are accustomed to managing others through observable emotional response, is deeply uncomfortable. There is a particular form of desperation that manifests not in obvious pleading, but in speed. The man who responds too quickly reveals that he was waiting for the message. The man who accepts an offer without the appropriate pause reveals that no alternatives were being considered. The man who appears at the first available moment after rejection reveals that his activities between contacts were insufficient to occupy him. Speed, in these contexts, is not efficiency. It is a confession of preoccupation, and preoccupation communicates the one thing you cannot afford to communicate: that the other party's participation in your life is consuming a disproportionate portion of your attention. Delay is power, not infinite delay. That becomes its own form of communication, and equally legible as anxious avoidance. But the measured, unhurried delay of a man whose schedule is genuinely full, whose considerations are numerous, whose response, when it arrives, carries the weight of someone who had several things to attend to before arriving at this particular matter. This is not manipulation in the contemptible sense. It is the accurate representation of how a man of worth should be spending his time. And if you are not spending your time that way, then the first work is to build a life sufficiently full that the delay is not strategic, but simply true. Therefore, the strategic instruction is not merely about behavior in the moment of rejection. It is about the architecture of your life. Narrow it, concentrate it into a single dependency, and you will be desperate regardless of what your face does. Widen it, cultivate multiple avenues of advancement, build capabilities that serve more than one possible future, and the composure will be authentic. Men read authenticity accurately, even when they cannot articulate what they are reading. The performed indifference of a man with no alternatives is distinguishable from the genuine indifference of a man with several. Perhaps not immediately, but over the duration of a relationship, the performance will fracture at some point, and the fracture will be remembered long after the composure is forgotten. Weakness revealed is weakness remembered. And this sentence deserves to sit alone because it is perhaps the most consequential observation I can offer you. The human memory is peculiarly structured around moments of visible vulnerability. A man can project strength for months, for years, and a single visible break, a moment of pleading, of overt need, of unconcealed fear, will become the primary data point in the assessment of everyone who witnessed it. It will not be weighed against the months of composure. It will displace them. And because human beings, when they assess the reliability and formidability of another person, are searching for the crack, not the surface, the crack. And when they find it, it is catalogued as the truth beneath the surface. Everything before it is reclassified as performance. I watched this happen to men of genuine capability throughout my years in service. A negotiator of considerable skill who was known to be imperturbable, until one evening, under the combined pressure of a failed alliance and an enemy's deliberately provocative insult, he raised his voice in a room full of observers. He did not do anything catastrophic. He simply raised his voice and allowed his fury to become briefly visible. It was enough. The carefully constructed reputation for calm deliberation was not destroyed, but it was hollowed. Men who had previously treated his composure as real now treated it as a habit they were waiting to see broken again, and they were more likely than before to create conditions designed to test it. Examine the behavior of those who command rooms without effort. I have sat in enough courts to observe this with precision. They share a common quality that is frequently misattributed to arrogance or coldness. It is neither. It is the genuine, unhurried demeanor of people who are not waiting for anyone else to determine their worth. They arrive at a position, they hold it and without anxious revision, and they allow others to come to them or not. They do not fill silences compulsively. They do not over-explain their reasoning. They do not seek, with each statement, the confirmation that the statement has landed well. They deposit their position and move on, as a man deposits a coin and does not then hover over the transaction to ensure the merchant has valued it correctly. This behavior reads as power because it is power. The man who does not need your validation of his position has more freedom of action than the man who requires it. He can say what is true rather than what is welcome. He can maintain his assessment under pressure of disagreement, rather than revising it to accommodate the room. He can allow displeasure in others without the consuming urgency to resolve it. Each of these freedoms is unavailable to the desperate man, because the desperate man has structured his security around external validation, to when every action he takes must be calculated against its effect on the approval he depends on. Appear unmoved, not because you feel nothing, but because what you feel is irrelevant to what others are permitted to see. Your enemies are watching, not your declared enemies. Those are known and managed, the silent ones. The ones you have not yet identified as enemies because they are still presenting themselves as neutral or even friendly. The composure you maintain in apparently minor moments is therefore not minor protection. It is the cumulative construction of a reputation that provides cover when you genuinely need it. A man who has been consistently composed makes it expensive for his enemies to claim he panicked, because the witnesses will not believe it. A man who has demonstrated visible desperation at multiple points has made it easy for his enemies to characterize him as unreliable, and because the witnesses have seen it themselves. Never let them see you chase. Never let them see you plead. Never let them see the calculation behind the composure. Only the composure. The world will not meet you where you are in terms of your actual condition. It has no interest in your actual condition. It will meet you where your image places it. If your image says abundance, you will be treated as abundant even when the cellars are empty. If your image says indifference, and you will be chased even when you desire pursuit. If your image says that you are a man whose equilibrium cannot be disturbed by ordinary reversals, you will be extended the courtesies due a man of that character. The deference, the careful approach, the measured offers that men extend when they believe your alternatives are genuine. This is not fraud. It is the understanding that perception governs behavior, that behavior governs outcomes, and that outcomes eventually shape reality to match the image. The prince who appeared victorious before the final battle was won drew to himself the soldiers, the money, the alliances that made the victory actual. The man who appears to have options before he has secured them draws to himself the conditions that make options real. The image precedes the substance, and those who wait for the substance before constructing the image will wait long enough that others have already claimed what they were waiting to deserve. One final observation before I leave you with this. You will be tempted, in your moments of greatest pressure, to believe that revealing your vulnerability will create sympathy. That if people understood the weight of what you are carrying, they would ease their demands, they would extend more favourable terms, so they would move towards you in compassion. This is perhaps the most dangerous delusion in the catalogue of political naivety. Powerful men do not increase the generosity of their offers in proportion to the desperation of those across the table. They decrease it, because desperation confirms need, and need confirms that the minimum required to retain the other party is less than what was previously offered. The revelation of your urgency does not make them generous. It makes them efficient. They will now offer exactly what your desperation obliges you to accept. No more. And they will feel that this is fair because you have told them what you require, and they have provided it. Sympathy is the currency of the weak dispensed to the weaker. It has no place at tables where power actually moves. The man who arrives at those tables seeking sympathy should not be surprised to find none. He should have expected it, and he should have left the desperation at home. It's where it belongs, acknowledged privately, managed internally, visible to no one who could use it against him. Remember this. A man who appears to be winning while he is losing retains the possibility of actually winning. A man who appears to be losing while he is losing confirms to everyone watching that the loss is final. The appearance of an outcome is not the outcome, but it precedes the outcome. It shapes it. It draws resources toward it or repels them. It makes allies confident or uncertain. It makes enemies bold or cautious. You do not have control over all circumstances. You have control over how circumstances appear to be affecting you. That control is not trivial. In many situations, it is the only control you have. And in many situations, it is sufficient. The world chases what does not chase it. Appear unmoved. Then, in the privacy of your own deliberation, do what must be done. Say, but let no one see the door through which you entered your decision. Let them see only that you have decided. That is enough. That has always been enough.